We'll say go live. What's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lasser Cast, where we review horror movies and horror streaming shows. I am joined with my good friend over there, Dr. Zayas God, and today we are going to be talking about Dario Argento's 1987 film Opera. Danny, speaking of opera, did you know that today is John Bon Jovi's birthday?
No, I did not. And I don't know how that ties into opera, but okay.
I don't know. I was on Twitter while I was waiting for you, and I just saw that his birthday is 62. He's from Perth Amboy, New Jersey, which is very close to where I'm from in Staten Island.
Yeah. I'm really excited to talk less about Bon Jovi and more about Argento's bizarre opera movie that ends up as a Sound of Music clone.
Yes.
And I'm joined today by a very special guest.
Oh.
The Dune Popcorn Bucket.
Oh, my God.
Yes, there it is.
Oh,
Look.
my God.
Tell me this is not a sex toy. Come on, everybody.
I'm not able to tell you that. I saw that on Thursday night, and I went to a Regal, so I couldn't even get the freaking bucket, man. It's only at AMC.
I strategized because I have Regal Unlimited, and when I found out that this was an AMC only product, I contacted a coworker of mine, a good friend named Richie, if he's listening. He has AMC Plus in Jersey, and he went specifically to get this for me.
God bless him.
And I don't know if you can tell, this has no practical use. If there's popcorn in here, I might get us demonetized for this. But like, you can't even like get popcorn out of the bucket. It's useless.
Danny is fisting a sex toy for those of you that are watching or listening to this podcast.
Anus worm.
Yes.
Popcorn bucket, which I wanted to have on our channel right before we talked about a bizarre giallo that ends up in the Swiss Alps, featuring the mystery-solving crows and ravens.
Yeah. Well, that's actually what I wanted to get on right away. Is that there are more crow visual shots. Like, there's more shots of like crow vision, like a crow flying, and you're looking through its eyes, than in the movie The Crow. Right.
Yes. The movie starts on a prolonged like eye shot of they're crows, right? They're not ravens. They're crows that are supposed to be ravens in the
I took it as crows. I mean, who knows? I might be wrong.
Yeah, a murder of crows in this movie.
There you go. A ton. And so it's funny, right? Because The Crow is another thing that was trending this week too. Because have you seen that Bill Skarsgård picture on Twitter?
I have, and while it's very obvious to go, oh, they Jared Leto'd him, I've seen people posting, and maybe you and Brian are the comic book guys. Hashtag comic books transformed.
There you go.
But I've seen some of the original artwork from, I think it's, who's the artist? Barr?
James O'Barr, yeah.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he actually does kind of look like that original artwork that that the artist did. So I think this is yet another one of those cases where the internet creates this incredibly negative opinion on something. Robert Pattinson, Heath Ledger, Ben Affleck. We've done this before for now close to 25 years, where it's like, Heath Ledger's the Joker. Fuck this shit. And he wins an Oscar, and it's the greatest movie, comic book movie performance of all time. Ben Affleck is Batman. Fuck this shit. He turns out to kick ass as Batman. The Twilight guy. I think everybody loved the casting of Bill Skarsgård, and I think we only get that like one shot. What I didn't like was the clip of the I guess the writer or whoever created the image for the movie was like, all 19-year-olds will look at him and be like, that's us. And I'm like, you don't know 19-year-olds.
Yeah.
Like, I have a 19-year-old. Like my son's turning 20 next week. I teach high school juniors and seniors who are almost 19, and none of them look at Post Malone and go, hot stuff. So
right.
Yeah, we're way off on tangents now.
Okay,
but, yeah,
that's fine. Let's bring it back to Argento though.
Well, actually, we were talking about The Crow, so
yeah, it was a good segue. But to bring it back to Argento, what was really interesting to me was, this movie has a major part of it where there's a horror director trying to make an opera, and I realized that that's like life, or that's art imitating life in this case. So Dario Argento was going to direct an opera himself. It's called Rigoletto, and he wanted to make it an experience. There was going to be like volts coming through the chairs when there's scenes where lightning should be striking.
So like William Castle 1950s horror movie stuff.
That's exactly where my mind went with that. Yeah. Yes. And
awesome.
So he ended up, kind of having creative differences, and he didn't end up making the opera, but he made this movie.
But
and go ahead, man.
This is two of the three Argento movies we've covered. We've talked about this idea of Argento being a very autobiographical filmmaker. Tenebrae was he took the idea that he was effectively being stalked by a fan who was like writing him letters about his film and threatening to kill him, and he took that to create the horror author in Tenebrae, who is being left notes about his book and how his book is inspiring the serial killings.
Right.
So Argento was very autobiographical in his filmmaking, and I didn't know about the Rigoletto thing until I started looking up some stuff about this movie.
Right.
But I'm glad, just like with Tenebrae, I'm glad because this movie, I rewatched it a few days ago, and it's just from literally the opening shot until the last shot, it is insane. It is an insane 95 minutes, and this was, and I think I've mentioned this the last time, this is like the end of his golden era, which really starts with the movie we covered last week, Deep Red, and ends with this. So 1975 to 1987, 88. I think this came out in very early 88. Just an unbelievable 13-year run of just banger after banger after banger with like no missteps at all. Like some of this, your opinion might go high or low on like a movie like Inferno, which I happen to love, or Phenomena, which I happen to love also. But like, to go from Deep Red to Suspiria to Inferno to Tenebrae to Phenomena to this is just it's an almost godlike stretch. It's like a Mount Rushmore stretch of horror movies for one director. And I've compared him to Carpenter because it was like Carpenter's almost the exact period, just probably extended a little bit further because of In the Mouth of Madness and John Carpenter's Vampires, which I think is a grossly underrated movie.
Hey, come on. What about Ghost of Mars, man? That's not a classic.
I mean, Escape from L.A.?
Okay, yeah. You can make that face over there. That's fine. Well, I actually like this movie a lot, too. And it came out, you said in like early 88. It says when you like look it up, it says 87. Regardless, it has that 90s feel to it. That 90s feel that that I love. Like we've talked about a lot of movies that are like kind of like 89 through like 94, where they kind of have this feeling, this look to them. And I just love that. And this movie kind of feels like one of those movies. It's interesting, just going back to the behind the scenes stuff. You were talking about Argento being a very autobiographical filmmaker. He went through some crazy shit during the process of writing this movie. Like, for instance, he was with Daria Nicolodi at that point. They were both arrested for drug possession while he was writing this script. His father died. His father had been ill for a while, and his father died during the making of this movie. So
and his father was a producer on almost all of his movies up until his death. Yeah. If you look at, if you watch the credits of all of his movies, like Claudio Argento, Salvatore Argento, it's a very family affair. His father, his uncle were always producers. and his father worked in the film industry, and that's, he has a very similar story almost to Charles Band, in the sense that Charles Band's father worked in the film industry and then basically produced a lot of his early work back in like the Empire and the very beginning of the Full Moon stage.
So Argento and Charles Band are Nepo babies?
Talented Nepo babies.
Talented Nepo babies, yes. They deserve it, yes. Well, so, things change, right? And you're saying that his period kind of ends with this, like his God tier period. And, maybe that has something to do with his father dying too. But, during that God tier period, there was him working with Goblin and also Keith Emerson, right? This one, the film score is made by Brian Eno, who is also a very talented composer. What do you think about the music in this movie?
I really like it. I think it's definitely unique from some of the other films that he's done. I think for obvious reasons. I think there's obviously more of a skew towards opera music for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, I think also it's very obvious that he was into opera, because he then would go on to do a Phantom of the Opera movie later on. I think in the late 90s, maybe 98, where his daughter plays Christine, like the lead. Yeah.
That's cool.
And I think the Phantom, I'm not sure, but I think it's like Thomas Kretschmann, who he played like Otto von Strucker in the MCU.
Oh, that guy? Okay.
Yeah,
I know who that guy is.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, he did like a Phantom movie. He did a disastrous Dracula movie. Yeah, the 90s is where things start to, and maybe it is because his father wasn't there and he got away from a lot of the stuff that, like, a lot of his, like, he always credited Dario Nicolodi as being his muse. And I'm pretty sure they were like already divorced by the time this movie, or separated by the time that this movie was made. And to the point where like she had to be like convinced to do it. I think it was like her death scene in this movie is what got her to come back and do the movie, which is an all-time like classic death scene.
Yes. I want to talk about that death scene in detail because it is pretty amazing. But I wanted to like just kind of talk about some of the things that I saw in this movie that really stood out and that were interesting. Like, you're giving me this sort of background info on Argento and like what's in his other movies. As far as like him and animals, is that like a thing where it's like an animal has to get killed in one of his movies?
I'm trying to think. Like, there is a scene in Suspiria where a dog does the killing. We've seen in Tenebrae where a dog goes crazy and chases a woman almost nonstop for like 5 straight minutes.
At least, yeah.
Inferno, there is a famous scene where a guy takes a bag of rats to the lake in in Central Park to drown them.
Okay. Wow, Jesus.
So that could be the case. But I mean, we just covered Deep Red, which has the weird scene with the lizard, right? Yeah. This scene obviously deals. There's a crow or raven that's killed, and the crow and they always remember. They have long memories. That. I mean, the animal death in this movie at least plays a crucial part in the plot. And like basically sets up the whole ending climax of the film.
Oh, we'll get to that too. I definitely want to talk about that ridiculous sequence. I mean, we should get to like just the plot and like what happens in this. So basically, this one theater, this opera group is going together a show of Macbeth, and it's like an avant-garde opera group. The main singer, she gets into an argument with the like director or the producer or whatever, and she walks out and she gets hit by a car. So then her understudy takes over. It's this woman named Betty, and Betty is our main character. We follow her around, and pretty quickly into her success, into her rise to stardom, she gets attacked by this mysterious figure that she's seen in her dreams. And this figure, the way that he deals with Betty is pretty fucked up. You want to explain that part, Danny?
Well, I mean, first off, we have our very stereotypical giallo, black gloved, kind of masked,
Right.
killer, and he forces Betty to watch what happens to the people that she cares about. So she has this like fling with a stagehand, and he ties Betty up, and he puts, as your ticker suggests, he tapes these needles under her eyes, which is actually something that Argento had thought about to do to the audience. He got this idea because he didn't like the fact that people in the audience would close their eyes and avert their attention from some of the gore and some of the scary moments on screen. And he was like, wouldn't it be great if we forced them to watch? And if they tried to close their eyes, they would bleed and, pierce their eyelids. And so he tapes these needles upward. It makes for one of the greatest visuals in horror movie history. It also serves to give this movie one of the most iconic, like, poster images in horror movie history. The image of just, Betty's eyes with the needles going in front of them. And she's basically forced to watch as trickles of blood go down these needles as this killer brutally murders her stagehand boyfriend and other people throughout the film. This happens to her at least 2 or 3 times, and it's not overkill. It's brutal. It's just, as a viewer, it makes you want to look away, but then that's kind of the point, and this is something we talked about with Deep Red, that him and the writer of Deep Red came up with these kills based on like what would make the audience go, oh, like, oh, that could happen to me. Oh, ow. And he comes up with this idea as like, we're going to do this to the audience, we're going to tape their, so that they can't close their eyes. Who's the actress who plays Betty? I forgot.
I can take a look at it real quick. Let me just scroll down.
She has like
she's got a weird last name. What were you gonna say about her? I'll look up her name while you're saying it.
I think I like her in this movie, but apparently, like, she was very difficult to work with, and Argento hated working with her.
Really? Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah. That's interesting. Okay.
I mean, then again, if I were like cast in a movie where the director is taping needles to my eyes, I'd probably not. I'd probably have some issues.
So her name is Christina, and then I'm gonna mess up her last name, but I believe it's Marcellak.
Okay. Christina Marcellak. There's another Marcellak actress who worked in like Lucio Fulci movies also.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if they're related or not.
Yeah, but, maybe. Yeah. I mean, you bring up this point that I kept thinking of over and over again as I was watching this movie. And I should also point out to you that I like this movie a lot. You were kind of happy last week that I liked Deep Red so much, and I'm digging all of these Giallo Argento movies. I was digging this one too. They're all very different, yet they're all very similar in certain ways too.
I feel like this is us rubbing off on each other. No sexual pun intended.
I might need that Dune bucket. Oh my god!
I've gotten you to like experience Dario Argento, who's a filmmaker that I love, whose tier work for me is almost Mount Rushmore level.
Right.
And where you've never watched any of his before until, correct. And you are a huge Dune fan. And in the last 2.5 weeks, I went to the movie theater to rewatch Dune Part 1, then went to see David Lynch's Dune for the first time, which was done by Fathom Events. And then I went to see a screening of Dune Part 2, like a fan screening. You haven't seen Dune Part 2 yet, have you?
I saw it Thursday.
Oh, you did? Okay, like just out of 10, is it like an 11 for you, or is it?
No. And I wouldn't even say the first movie is a 10 out of 10 for me. It might be like a
You
9.5.
prefer
Like
Blade Runner 2049?
No. It's just like, it's really good. Both of them are really good. However, like they do kind of feel long. The second one feels long. You said it when you wrote it in our thread. And there's one major change. I think they're like both like super well made, and there isn't anything like cheesy or anything like that in either of them. Yeah. But it's just like kind of long, and there's some things missing from the books that I really love.
My super short take on it is, as somebody not familiar with the source material, what Villeneuve does best is scope, sound, and production. That is unparalleled. That is epic filmmaking to the T. Where he struggles for me, because what I love in a movie is character and interactions, and this just doesn't feel like a movie to me that could ever get acting nominations. Like Zendaya, I love her. I think she's a great actress. She just felt like she was Zendaya in the sand. And there's Timothée Chalamet in the sand. The only actors that I loved in this movie were Rebecca Ferguson, shock, and Javier Bardem.
Both
other than that, I was just like, oh, Elvis is bald and white, and
No, I thought he was good actually, and I love Stellan Skarsgård in like anything, but their roles are like diminished compared to the other guys.
I actually kind of felt bad for Christopher Walken. Like I was like,
he's old.
Just kind of he looked old and just there. He looked like he was cast just to be there, and
just to be Christopher Walken.
Yeah. Oh, you need to fight in the sand for Arrakis.
Damn, man, we were just bringing our gold this morning, man. You got Christopher Walken impersonation. You got your fucking
popcorn
bucket.
What did you think of the Daria Nicolodi?
Yes. Okay, well, I want to get to that one. I do. Yes. There is a pretty amazing fucking sequence right before that, though.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, okay, so the killer shows up. He kills the stagehand boyfriend that you mentioned. And if this is your first time watching this is a pretty brutal like scene to watch. I kept wondering, how the fuck did they film this where she's got that tape on her eyes with the needles, and there's just constant close-ups of her eyeball, and like it looks like the needles are literally going into her eyelids at some point, and there's blood coming down. It looks like it's actually happening to her. Now, okay, so he kills the stagehand boyfriend. It's super intense, and it's this sequence. They play this same like metal song every time. Where it's like, oh, the girls lay on the back for you, like some kind of shit like that. The second kill like that is really interesting, don't you think? When they kill the what is she like?
The costume designer.
Yeah. What do you think of that sequence?
I mean, that is brutal because she gets kind of the upper hand on the killer first.
Yep.
And it's like that classic, almost cliche thing nowadays where she's like I could deliver a death blow,
right?
But instead, let me unmask him first. And she unmasks him, and she's like, "Oh, it's this. Look, it's this." And then he like springs back to life, and kills her in like a really slow, like agonizing way.
Yeah.
And then there's this added scene of like, it almost feels just like tacked on to be extra like brutal, where she accidentally swallows this gold bracelet and he has to like cut into her with scissors to find it.
Yeah.
It is extra brutal for the sake of it almost. And I think it's like part of what adds to the like weird factor of this movie is like it's this like kind of out of nowhere scene. It doesn't add much in terms of like specific plot. Like the bracelet is like lost in like the next scene.
Yeah, no. You're right. It doesn't like move the plot forward, but I think it goes along with the idea of voyeurism, right? Because that's a big part of this movie. Like, why don't we kind of reveal one of the things about the killer before we get on to that kill that you're dying to talk about? So the killer, spoilers, guys, for this movie that is about almost as old as I am. The killer is actually connected to the main character. He's connected to Betty. Her mother liked to have like people, I guess, tortured and killed. And he was like a teenager that was in love with her, and he would kill for the mother or like torture people for the mother. And she would watch and she would get off on it. And he eventually did kill Betty's mother himself. And so like when Betty kind of starts to rise in stardom, he sees her and he thinks that she's like a reincarnation of her mother. And that's when he starts to like force her to watch him killing people.
Yeah, the mom was definitely into like some BDSM stuff, and there's it. This is a trope of Giallo sometimes where they will use flashbacks and like certain ways of filming to like give you clues to the background of the killer is.
Yeah.
But then like without so that it'll always be a mystery because they're like showing you clues as to why the killer is doing it, but not who the killer is. Like there's nothing to lead you to who the killer ends up until the reveal happens. And then he basically spells it out for her at the end.
Right. But you know what? Before we get to that, because that's coming right up, let's do your kill, man, that you want to keep talking about, where Dario Nicolodi gets taken out. Daria Nicolodi.
Yeah, it's just from a technical standpoint, it's just an absolutely amazing effect. And it's an effect that Tarantino would basically use in Kill Bill. Again, this is the second time I brought that up. I know that Tarantino has gone on record and said that the Tenebrae kill with the axe cutting off the hand and the blood splatter is like his favorite kill, and that he loves that movie. But there's musical cues that I picked up on in Deep Red, and then there's this moment, of course, where he basically redoes that moment in Kill Bill when Bill shoots the bride in the head at the during the wedding sequence.
Right.
It's just this amazing scene to set it up. The police have sent somebody. There's this one police detective who is like, tall, handsome, good-looking guy who you're like, oh, he's probably going to be the romantic lead. And he tells her he sent somebody ahead to so she lets somebody into her apartment thinking it's the police officer. But then she gets another call outside when Daria Nicolodi comes that the guy's outside. And they're like, wait a minute, guy outside, guy in the apartment. Who's the real, cop? One of them's obviously the killer. And Daria Nicolodi is trying to like, look through the keyhole, show me your badge. And the guy pulls the gun and fires. And you get to see this amazing shot of the bullet going through the keyhole, basically into her eye, out through the back of her head, all in like one motion with no cutting. It's just an incredible scene. The technical aspect of that scene, I what it must have taken to film that. But yeah, it's this amazing. Apparently, Daria Nicolodi like loved that scene and was like, "All right, I'll stay on the movie, even though it's very awkward for me. I'll stay on the scene." On the movie just because that's such a really cool death scene.
And that's one of the things I love about these Giallo movies is that the deaths can be very creative. I know in like slashers, they usually typically have like one specific weapon, and then they might like switch it up just to make things creative in different scenes. But often with these movies, it's a matter of like practicality of like, okay, well, I can't get into the house and pretend to be a cop. She's looking through the keyhole, boom, right through the keyhole. I just like, just kind of the changing it up and being creative like that.
I'll tell you another movie that it just popped into my mind that borrowed very heavily from that scene, and it's Saw 2.
Okay.
In Saw 2, there's a great moment at the beginning when all the characters, including Amanda and the kid, wake up in the house and they find out that they're like, there's gas in the house and they have to get out. Yeah. And the one guy looks through the keyhole and you see this like rotating camera shot of the other side of the keyhole where there's a gun. And by like looking through, it triggers the bullet. And then he gets shot in the head. And that's the first, I think, death that sparks like Saw 2. So this kill, I know, has influenced at least 2 movies. And it's just technically, it's one of the best kills Argento's ever done. I would really love to hear your opinions on Suspiria and Inferno, because those movies are different in the sense that they are much more supernatural based than obviously the 3 movies that we watched. Yes, Deep Red does have a psychic who has visions, but that's where the supernatural aspects of it end. Yeah. This movie has, I guess, ravens who can have amazing memory, but there's nothing supernatural really about it. Yeah.
Well, our Deep Red video did better than I was expecting it to. I'd be down for doing some more Argento. I don't know if we have anything like coming up in March that's like, oh, we got to cover this.
I mean, if you want to do another Argento movie next Saturday, I think Suspiria would be a great way to round this up, because that's like probably his most infamous, most famous movie. Like when people think of Dario Argento, they think of Suspiria.
Yeah.
And I'd really be interested to see your take on it, being how different it is to the Giallo movies, because absolutely there's Giallo aspects to it, but it's also a movie about a coven of witches, and the kills in it are what makes it stand out. Like you talked about practicality. There's no practicality in Suspiria. It is some of the most bonkers kill sets that you'll ever see.
Okay. I mean, I'm down. I am digging Argento, man. And so, like, we can just keep it going, man. Just go from Giallo to witchcraft stuff. Yeah. Well, let's stick with the Giallo stuff for now. So for the killer, it's revealed that it is this fucking cop that you were talking about before. We should probably drop his name in here. The cop his name's Inspector Alan Santini. And he's the one that was with Betty's mom, and she like kind of corrupted him basically. So the jig is up. Eventually we find out who it is, because the theater director that's been helping Betty during her performance of Macbeth, he makes it to where the crows fly out of a giant cage, swoop into the audience, and they find the killer, the one who killed the other crows.
I fucking love this scene. I forgot. It's been a long time. I think I mentioned that one of the first things I did when the pandemic started was I binged Argento movies, from like Bird with the Crystal Plumage all the way through whatever came after Opera. I want to say either Trauma or it was one of those like 90s movies. And I was like, oh, that one I didn't like so much. All right, maybe I'll pivot to something else. So it's been about 4 years since I watched Opera. Yeah. And you forget how bonkers that scene is, where it's like the director of the opera on opening night of the opera is like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to crash a giant cage through the set. Right. And then open the cage, and you have like the animal wrangler is like, go get him. And the crow, and there's this amazing shot of crow vision or raven vision. And basically what they did was, I think they put like a camera on a crane and just swirled it around. Yeah. We covered Tenebrae, and we talked about that incredible loom shot that goes all the way peeking through the windows up and around the house. And this is like the next level of that. And it's just insane. Yeah. The shot and the Raven is able to identify the guy who killed the crow earlier in the movie. Right. And they peck out his eyeball, and there's this like delayed shot, this like prolonged shot of a raven just munching down on an eyeball.
Yes. I actually really liked how the eyeball looked, because it didn't look like your typical eyeball that you see in horror movies. It was sort of almost like a oval shape, and it was kind of flat as opposed to like just a big ball. Yeah, but I love that sequence. I love the way Santini's face looks when he's all covered with gore after his eyes been picked out. He's able to get Betty backstage and in this room that has all these like books and I guess maybe scripts or whatever. He ties her to the chair once more. I was thinking that he was going to kill someone once again with her bound in there, but instead he says he's going to kill himself. Now, I know that this scene came out prior to I'm trying to think of what's it called, Red Dragon, which is like the remake. It's not the remake, but it's based on a book by Thomas Harris, and that book was also the inspiration for Manhunter. You saw Manhunter, right?
Yeah, the movie Red Dragon. The book is called Red Dragon, but
right, the book is Red Dragon.
Red Dragon is like the remake of Manhunter.
Yeah, and so
I actually liked Red Dragon more than Manhunter. And I know Michael Mann did Manhunter, and I think it's great, but I loved Ralph Fiennes as in Red Dragon. He's one of the few horror movie villains that like legit scares me. Like his performance in that movie is terrifying. Philip Seymour Hoffman, man, God rest his soul. He was great in that movie too. He's got that great scene as the paparazzi guy.
Right. And I don't mean to spoil that movie, but one of the parts of it that made me think of this movie was that the killer makes it seem like he's dead and like that his body is getting burned, but it was like a bait and switch essentially. Like he has Betty, her eyes, she's blindfolded. In Red Dragon, the woman is literally blind, and so she feels like she shot him and killed him, and then we find out that it was actually like a mannequin that was set on fire. So the movie's not over yet because there's still time. That's one of the problems with watching a movie on your computer, right? Is that you see the amount of time left.
Yeah, or on streaming where like you pause it, you be like, wait, there's 12 minutes left of this movie?
Right. And so of course, this is Danny's other thing that he loves referencing in this video. It becomes the Sound of Music, at the very end.
The first time I saw this movie, I legit thought something happened, and that sometimes when you're watching a movie on a streaming network, when the movie ends and if you don't press a button fast enough, another movie just starts.
Yeah,
I thought that was what happened, because like it's like a blink and you miss, where it's like, it's over, he's dead, the hills are alive.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, what the fuck is happening? She's with the director in a cabin in the Alps. Like it really does. According to IMDb, like the producers were like, can you scrap this Sound of Music ending? And Argento was like, no, we're going to the Alps, and like fought to keep this ending in. And I honestly don't know if I love this ending part of the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, the director, Marco, hears on the news that it turns out that there was no body found, and he like yells out to her, he's still alive. Right. And it leads to this like legit chase through the Alps.
Yeah.
Where the killer shows back up and he kills Marco, which I felt like crap. Like Marco was like a really good character. We didn't even talk about this. There is a moment in this movie that, rewatching it, I almost had to pause the movie because I was laughing so hard. She's just witnessed her stagehand boyfriend get murdered with needles in front of her eyes. She like gets out of that scene, bumps into Marco and the director, and Marco's like, get in the car, come on. What happened? Tell me what happened. And she's like, no, I can't talk about it. So usually before I go out on set, I like to have sex. And he's like, yeah, when I'm writing a script, I like to masturbate. And I'm like, she just witnessed a fucking murder.
I know.
And
Yeah.
I want to give credit to, and I sent you the video. I want to give credit to another YouTube channel, the Horror Geek, Mike Bracken, who he was on Beat the Geeks years ago. You probably recognize him if you ever watch Beat the Geeks. He has a great YouTube channel where he does, he looks at a lot of low budget and splatter movies, and he fills out gore cards for them. And the Horror Geek it's a really fun channel. I watch his videos all the time. So as we've been rewatching these Argento movies, or you've been watching them, I've been rewatching his Sick Flicks episodes about these Argento movies. And he gives a lot of great detail about opera specifically. But yeah, he makes a hilarious joke about that scene. And it just, because Marco, I thought, was a pretty interesting character. You're kind of waiting the whole movie for him to be like a sleazeball and try to like get her in bed. And he never really does. And then he ends up saving her. And you're like, oh, okay, great. So he's the hero.
Right.
And then he kind of just gets unceremoniously stabbed to death at the end.
Yeah, in the Swiss Alps, yeah.
And, you know, the killer ends up just kind of getting arrested by the Swiss police force.
Yes. And it's funny because, you know, this movie is like dubbed, right? And sometimes it's very obvious that it's dubbed. But boy, is it most obvious when these cops show up. And they're like, hey, he was talking to you, but he let you go. Like, what happened? Was he like into you or something? Like the way their voices sound, they just sound so goofy at the very end there. And I did feel really bad when Marco got killed off because he was kind of cool. And, you know, he had that kind of 90s vibe to him. He had that kind of blonde dyed hair. I was like, this movie feels like it kind of gives birth to the 90s, the way things look.
And it's you know, that actor, he died very young of AIDS. And and when I read about that, it really like it reminded me, and it put like that time period, because like Philadelphia with Tom Hanks, and then that movie came out just a couple years later and really like opened up the world to like exactly what the AIDS crisis was. And now it's like, you know, AIDS/HIV is just like, it's not the death sentence at all that it used to be. Like, I remember being 10 years old, and when like Magic Johnson announced that he had HIV, like people were holding memorials for him that like, oh, well, that's it. Like Magic Johnson's going to die. And now he's thriving 30 something, you know, 32 years later, he's thriving. He owns multiple like sports teams. And like, you know, here's an actor, you know, in the 80s who, you know, died of AIDS. And it's just like a sad reminder of that time period. But yeah, I liked Marco as a character because and again, you could really feel the autobiographical nature of Argento there. And, you know, like here's Argento, who had a relationship with an actress that he worked with all the time, who he co-wrote and worked with all the time.
Right.
And, you know, so, you know, a director having like a close relationship with a beautiful, you know, actress in his operas, I guess it, you know, makes sense.
Yeah. Art imitating life once again. And, you know, I don't know what the police are like in Dario Argento's Italy, but in his movies, it seems like the police are like really incompetent, right? Because like you just mentioned,
cops.
Yeah. Because you just mentioned that like she gets in this car and she's not talking about the grisly murder that she just saw, but she still was the girlfriend of this guy that's been murdered in this city, right? And you know, and the opera still goes on. No one shuts down production, even though one person was murdered at the actual opera, right? Then this kid is murdered.
Another thing we didn't mention is you mentioned that it's Macbeth. Yeah. And of course, there is the legend, one of the most famous legends of Macbeth is that Macbeth is a cursed production.
Right.
And that, like, anytime there's a production of Macbeth, whether it's a stage play, whether it's an opera, whether it's a movie, that weird, mysterious shit starts to happen, and there's, you know, death and destruction. You know, sets will get set on fire, and you know, it's this very famous legend of Macbeth being a cursed production. So it makes sense. That's another thing that makes extra sense for the movie. But yeah, you're right. The lights crash down and they're like, don't worry about it. Just keep going.
Yeah, just keep watching. Yeah, I would sit in that theater. No, I'm glad you brought up Macbeth, Danny, because if anyone knows Shakespeare, just a little bit of Shakespeare, they know that Lady Macbeth is a major character and that's who Betty is playing in this. Lady Macbeth has this really famous soliloquy where she's trying to get blood off of her hands and she feels like she can't wash it off. And she's just like struggling to wash blood off her hands. She says, out damn spot, or get out damn spot. Like she's trying to get the blood off of her hands. And I feel like that's such a smart choice for a show for this movie, considering that this girl's mother was connected to all these killings and tortures. Like she's basically trying to like get away from her lineage, from her legacy. And at the very end, when the killer is arrested, she says, I'm not my mother. She tries to trick him at first and be like, oh yeah, I'm like my mother. Let's get out of here. Let's go kill some people. And then when he's getting arrested by those guys, she's like, no, I'm not like my mother. Fuck you.
I'm so not like my mother that I'm going to watch this lizard.
Yeah.
I'm going to save the lizard.
Yes.
As the movie ends.
And I was going to ask you, did you feel like that was a callback to Deep Red and that little girl who killed the lizards? Do you think that is like it's like she could be evil like this little girl, but she's the opposite? Did you think it was like that or no?
I don't know. I mean, it's 12 and a half years later. I don't know if I mean, I'm sure that the lizard itself, like, I don't know. I'm not. My mother's the science teacher, but like maybe it's like, if you cut off the tail, it grows back. Maybe there's symbolism there. Okay. Or just like the idea of her like rescuing an animal at the end shows her like innocence.
Compassion. Yeah.
But I really, really love the first hour and 25 minutes of this movie. And I'm really not sure I love that last 10 minutes in the Alps. It's such a weird I can't even think of the word. Transition, a juxtaposition. Yeah, it's such a weird like transition that it almost overwhelms the movie to an extent. But I love opera because of how crazy it is, because of how visceral it is, because of how historically crazy some of the kills and the images are. It's watching again, like, not to, we always pimp the stuff that we have on the channel, but I did a YouTube short on the documentary Panico about his life and films. And that is streaming on Shudder. A lot of these Argento movies, they have an entire All Hail Argento category on Shudder. And that documentary goes into, and it mentions some of the stuff that was going on in his life basically at the end of this movie, and kind of what like leads to his films having less of an impact later on. I know that I think part of it was he moved a lot of his productions to the United States. And I think that he was now like, he didn't have as much control over the movies as he did when he was making them in Italy. But that documentary is well worth checking out. It is going to do what any good horror documentary does, and it's going to make you want to watch the Argento movies. But it does have like an air of sadness to it. And especially listening to his daughter talk, it gets very sad and very depressing at times. So I do recommend checking that out if you like his films, but just be wary, because it does get a little heavy towards like the later parts of it.
And I mean, that's okay. I am very interested in checking that out. I think I'll watch a couple more of his movies first, and then be like, oh, okay, now I know which one they're referencing. And of course, I'll watch Suspiria for next week. And it's funny, we mentioned Dune before. Have you watched Jodorowsky's Dune, that documentary?
I haven't, but now that I've watched all the Dunes, I'm going to definitely check that out. I've heard
He's watched all the Dunes and he's fucked all the Dune buckets. But anyway, that might be oh boy, he just whipped it out again with such a smile on his face too. What do you call it? We should probably
I can't believe it's real.
Yes, I know. I agree. I've actually shown your picture to multiple people this week because I've been like, hey, do you guys know about the Dune bucket? And then I just know that it's on your Twitter page. So I'm like, okay, look, here's Danny with his Dune bucket. Anyway, if you want to see Danny and his Dune bucket, then you can always subscribe to our channel and watch some of our videos. Danny's always posting videos on our channel. You want to talk about what's up there besides that Argento documentary?
I mean, we have a lot of Argento stuff. We did a review last week of a really cool new folk horror movie called oh God, what was it called?
Lovely, Dark, and Deep.
Lovely, Dark, and Deep. I was like, I know the words. I just don't remember the order they go in. Lovely, Dark, and Deep. That movie is available on VOD now. I know it's on Vudu for a couple buck rental. Really good. Stars Georgina Campbell from Barbarian. That was a really interesting movie that we talked about. We have our Argento stuff. And I'm going to be doing, I've been trying to figure out a time when I could have time to record. I want to do a series, not a series, but I want to do a video where I talk about Tubi. I was going to call it To Be or Not To Be, carrying on the Shakespeare. Because one of the things that you and Chris, you posted a funny, an image that a meme from on Twitter or X that me, you, and Chris had talked about, like how Tubi's got this amazing selection of horror films. Yeah. And it's free. And I've really been binging a lot of it. And I've just been going through. So I was going to just talk about a bunch of the movies that I've watched on Tubi and, throw out recommendations to some people. And that's pretty much it for now. There was also Charlotte has been bugging me to come back on our channel.
Oh, okay.
And Charlotte and I are binging through the Chucky franchise, not the movies, the TV show.
The show,
because the second half of season 3 is coming back in April. So, and this is a big one. Next Saturday. Oh, we'll talk about this in a minute, but next weekend, Charlotte and I are going to Monster Mania Con in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, where we hope to meet Brad and Fiona Dourif. The great Sam Raimi is going to be there. I'm imagining his line is going to be a little long, but we'll try to get on that line.
Man.
And just go to monstermania.net. You see the entire guest list. It's really an insane guest list this year. And we're going to see our friends at Ghost Girl Greetings, and we'll hang out and we'll have a great day there. We're actually going with my friend Jared, who does the Puppet Master Castle Freaks podcast.
So very cool.
So maybe I've done a spot on his show. Maybe I'll ask him if he wants to come on and talk about their podcast, and we could talk about a Charles Band movie over here.
That sounds fucking great. I'm totally down, man. Yeah. Man, you got some exciting stuff coming up. I'm jealous as hell, man, to meet Sam Raimi. Holy shit. And Brad Dourif. And I mean, you know me, I kind of have like a thing for his daughter too. So like, I take any of those. But yeah, it's been fun talking about opera with you. And I guess we're continuing the Argento next week. So if you guys want to see more of me and Danny, make sure you're subscribed. And we will see you